Greetings. Welcome to Wednesday night. Haverhill Small Groups here. And as you get in, feel free to check in if you're with us live. I am here live tonight. I know we've had a couple of not quite lives in February, but we're back to being live. And I'm glad to be with you. Just a public service announcement. Remember that the Sunday clocks go forward. Last thing you want to do is think you're early for church and then miss church completely. Most of us have smartphones now that will awaken us at the correct time and adjust for daylight savings time. But just in case you're old school, we'll talk about that in a little minute. A little bit. Clocks go forward. Spring ahead. Good times. All right, we're going to jump back into Romans. Hope y'all are doing well, having a great week. Hello, Layla. See you. Reverend Brian Spicer. Hello. All right, a few things I found. Some funny signs, and then a test to see if you're old that I did not come up with. So let's do it. Here we go. No thank you. I don't know why somebody would want to pee over their head backwards into a toilet, but if they have to put the sign, usually it means that somebody tried it or multiple people tried it. Not a good idea. Well, this is sad, right? Lost Roomba, does not bite. No natural predators for a Roomba out there in the wilderness, but the Roomba escaped when the bungalow door was left open. Very sad. They named it Higgins. Higgins cannot swim. This is interesting. Holds up to 1,000 pounds. Best thing to do when you're trying to sell something is put 810 pounds on it and have it collapse. No thank you to that table. Hey, this product contains peanuts. Those are our peanuts. Nice. Another very helpful sign. Our tax dollars at work there. This was sort of a life lesson, apparently. Measure twice, cut once. Not a great job there. No watching while phone being fixed. Makes me nervous. Last thing you want to do when your phone's being fixed is make the repairman nervous. Creative, but unassembled snowman for sale. Cheap. Can look like this. Yes, just buy some snow from your neighbor's yard and assemble it. Would you vote for Darth Vader? I'm not sure. In this day and age, actually might be a viable alternative. These lawyers must be good. Ditcher, quick, and hide. Divorce lawyers. That can't be real. Cannot be real. Swimming notice. Minnesota state law strictly prohibits underwater smoking. Again, signs that have to be created because people try this. This is all employees must stop crying before returning to work. I'm not sure what kind of job this is or what's happening to the employees, but it's a tough one. All right, here you go. This is a test that I found. So apparently, if you have done a majority of these things, you're old. I don't know what to tell you. I didn't come up with it. Again, officially old. So, have you ever played or at least heard of Angry Birds? And I'll go through this myself just for complete transparency. Yes, of course. I'll play it. Who hasn't played Angry Birds? Have you ever used both a border and a filter to make a photo you posted on Instagram look artsy and old? I am proud to say no, not posted on Instagram, I don't believe. I have an Instagram account, but I don't think I've ever posted anything. Used Instagram when it had this logo? No. It's a no for me. So I'm below the margin here. Have you ever sent or received a Farmville request? Never played Farmville, but I do remember back in the day when our Facebook feeds were flooded with Farmville requests. Very annoying. Hi, Claire. So I guess technically sent or received counts. Have you ever gotten poked or poked on Facebook? Remember, you could do that. You could just poke people that would sit there. Ugh. Unfortunately, yes. Have you ever played Words with Friends? Yes. It was very good redemption of the time back in the day. Have you ever used a DVR? Who's not used a DVR? All right, that doesn't mean old. That just means resourceful. Have you ever used an iPhone that only had a rear-facing camera? I'm guessing those were the early iPhones before you could swivel it. So I guess nice. I like it. This is a middle-age test. Well, I mean, middle-age doesn't sound that much better, but we'll take it. You ever gotten a viral video through an email from a friend or family member? Not that I've opened. Everybody knows you don't open videos. Here you go. MySpace page. Way back in the day, had a MySpace page. Those got hacked a lot. Have you ever downloaded anything from the iTunes store? You can still do that. That doesn't mean that's not a good. Ugh, I don't know. Have you ever listened to music from a click wheel, classic iPod? I still have one of these that still works. So yes. Have you ever downloaded music from LimeWire or another peer-to-peer site? No. I had never heard of LimeWire before I saw this survey. Have you ever binge watched a season or seasons of a TV show on DVD? Yes. Yeah, I think you're right, Jonathan. Have you ever gotten DVDs from Netflix through the mail? No. Have you ever watched a DVD and put on the director's or cast commentary track? No. You ever made a mixed CD? Guilty. Have you ever taken a selfie or picture with a non-front facing camera? So the olden days, you had to take a selfie like this. Absolutely not. Not really a selfie taker. Ever had to print out driving directions? Yes, that was the way to do it in the day. So you had those atlases of the entire United States that you had to carry around in your car until MapQuest came along, or you had to go to AAA and get specific maps printed out. I remember as I was a kid, whenever we'd go somewhere for vacation, my dad would stop at AAA and get a bunch of maps for wherever we were going. And MapQuest came along, you could print them out. Good times. Not safe because everybody's like this driving. Have you ever texted using T9 where you had to hit all the buttons? Maybe some of you still text that way before keyboards. Have you ever had someone tell you or told someone not to call before 7 or 9 p.m. because of minutes and free to talk? Yes, I do remember. First got my cell phone with Singular Wireless, and it was free on weekends and then after some nighttime hour. You ever watched a video or listened to music on Real Player? I think this is still a thing. So again, I'm not sure how I feel about that. Watch TRL to see who's being interviewed and to see what the music video rankings were. No. You ever talk to friends over AOL or MSN Messenger? Yes. Now you don't have to because everybody has cell phones. Have you ever had an AOL, Hotmail, or Yahoo email address? I still do. I don't know. This doesn't mean old. You ever rented a movie or game from a video store? All right, I guess Blockbuster is no more. You ever gone to the movies and seen a movie trailer you had never seen before because it was the only place you could see it? I do love watching the previews, but I've never gone to the movie theater just to watch a preview. Have you ever used dial-up internet? Yes. Remember that annoying sound when connecting to America Online? Have you ever listened to a CD with a portable CD player? Yeah. I feel like I'm being judged. Have you ever clicked no and been annoyed by Clippy? I thought Clippy was cool, so I have not been annoyed by Clippy. Those of you who don't know, he was the mascot for Microsoft Word for a long time. Have you ever watched the TV Guide channel to find out what was on? Yeah. You ever used a TV Guide or some other printed TV schedule listing to find out what was on? Yes. I mean, most of these things were before cell phones, but still. You ever paged somebody on their beeper or been paged? Yes. One of my first jobs, I had a pager, and it worked just great until I dropped it down a manhole. No more. Have you ever watched a Disney movie on VHS? Yes. And actually, these things are worth a lot of money now. So, some of them. Have you ever taped something you wanted to watch on TV using a VCR? Yes. I still remember back in the day when our family first got a VCR, it was for the Super Bowl when the Patriots were in it against the Bears back in 85 or 86. And we used the VCR so we could go to church that night. That was when we were committed to going to church all the time. Have you ever taped a song off the radio using a cassette? No. Maybe you have. Looked up a phone number in the Yellow Pages. The Yellow Pages is still a thing. You ever looked up the definition or spelling of a word in the dictionary? Yes. Like, did no one go to school that was doing this thing? I don't know. Have you ever taken film to be developed into physical pictures? All right, so this doesn't happen very often now. Everything's digital, so I get that. You ever used a payphone and had the number you were going to call memorized? That, no one memorizes numbers anymore. I can remember my old number from growing up, a couple of houses. But yeah, now we don't. Now we're lazy. We don't have to memorize phone numbers anymore. So that's it. Apparently that makes us middle-aged / old, if this was you. Sorry. So yeah, now that we were all encouraged. Nice. See, Nancy still memorizes numbers. I mean, I know a couple of numbers, but most of them, if we were to do that as a test, I would not know what your number is. AJ's never felt so old. You're welcome. All right, let's get back into Romans. So we took a short break from Romans last week, and now we are going to jump back in. So let's do it. All right, so we're in Romans 3:20 through 26 over the next couple of weeks. Big deal. Big deal. That's very true. Age is a state of mind. I like that. Now I feel better. Thank you, Nancy. Romans 3. Let's think of Romans 3 this way. If you've ever been to one of those Brazilian steakhouses, which is fantastic, by the way, because you just have a little coaster that's either green or red, and green means keep the meat coming, and red means stop, I'm done. You just keep the green out all the time, unless they're serving like chicken livers or something like that. But hopefully for the next couple of weeks, your listening coaster is flipped to green, because Paul has got a bunch of great stuff for us in just these 5 short verses in Romans 3. And it's really good stuff. And this isn't over speaking. This might be the most important passage in Romans. And some people say it's the most important in the whole Bible. Martin Luther, the great reformer, said that Romans 3:21 through 26 is the chief point and the very central place of the epistle, the letter, and of the whole Bible. Leon Morris said it's possibly the most important single paragraph ever written. So in this passage, Martin Luther said is the heart of the Reformation, the central truth he believed the church had corrupted, and that the Roman Catholic Church back in the day and the Protestants still disagree about today. So the Reformation was started by Martin Luther and continued, and it was really the break between Protestants and the Roman Catholic Church. And you say, well, what was the biggest difference between what Protestants and what Catholics believe, or what does Brookridge teach that differs from what I learned in the Catholic Church growing up? I mean, first of all, I'm grateful that anyone taught you while you were a kid to love the Bible, because however you grew up, in the Catholic Church, they study the Bible. Protestant Church, they study the Bible. But you find a major part of that answer for what is different from between RCC and Protestant is in this passage. And this passage answers a couple of common questions that people have outside of the faith. The first one is, why do you Christians make such a big deal about Jesus? Like, I get the emphasis on God, like we should be connected to the divine, but why is the life of a migrant Jewish rabbi who lived 2,000 years ago essential to my knowing God today? And what's the cross got to do with actually knowing God? It seems primitive, people will say, to say that we only know God through a sacrifice. And it leads to a second question. Why do Christians say that Jesus is the only way? Especially nowadays, people are like, you know what? I'm glad Jesus works for you. I'm glad if you're missing peace, but why force that on everybody else? Why can't we just know God or chase God or search out God in our own way? Let me ask you, if you're a Christian, if you're a Christ follower, how do you respond when you're asked that? I mean, other than slowly backing out of the room or praying for the rapture to happen right then, you might quote John 14:6, and that's fine. I've done that. John 14:6, where Jesus says, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. And that's fine. But in Romans 3, we get a fuller answer. You get why he's the only way. So it's not just a declaration that Jesus is the only way, it's an explanation for why he's the only way. So if you've ever wondered how to respond to that, this passage is where we turn, if you ever have to answer this. So let's start off where we left 2 weeks ago in verse 20, because remember, Paul's building an argument layer by layer. He said in verse 20, for no one will be justified in his sight, God's sight, by the works of the law, because only through the law comes the knowledge of sin, or the knowledge of sin only comes through the law. So Paul spent nearly 2 chapters explaining why the law is an insufficient answer to the universal human problem of sin. The law is basically what every religion puts forward. Every religion puts forward some list, some law of things to do and say, do these things, and if you do them well enough, you will live. And we explained that religion works off the premise, I obey, therefore I am accepted. 3 problems with that. First one is that you can't change the substance of the heart simply by giving it laws, any more than you could change my palate by commanding me to eat certain things. We use the example of pigs a couple of weeks ago eating pig slop, like nasty stuff. To keep a pig from eating the slop, you'd have to put a barrier between them and it. The moment you remove it, the pigs just go for it. But the average human being, you wouldn't have to command them not to eat that rotting food. It's revolting. There's no law required. So God doesn't want people in heaven who avoid the slop of sin just because they're commanded to. He wants people there who avoid sin because it's revolting to them, and who do good things because they delight in doing good things. Second problem with the law is that doing good works in order to secure salvation is inherently selfish. You're doing good works for the reason of saving yourself. That's selfish, which is a problem. Third problem with the law, and this is really where Paul goes for what we're going to talk about this week and next. Our sin leaves us legally guilty before God. So no amount of good works can repair the damage we've done. Like, imagine somebody broke into your house and they destroyed some of your most valuable possessions. They get caught. And then when they stand before the judge, they just start arguing about how committed they've been to their family, and they volunteered at the local food bank, and they've been otherwise a good person. You'd be like, well, that's great, but that doesn't fix or restore everything you've destroyed of mine. And that's what sin does. Sin violates and it destroys God's glory in the universe, and it overturns his justice. And justice, God tells us, is the foundation of his creation. Psalm 89:14 says, righteousness and justice are the foundation of your throne. So for creation to remain good, sustainable, justice has to be upheld. So Paul explains in that verse 20 that we just read, no one can be justified in his sight by the works of the law, because the knowledge of sin comes through the law. We said all the law can do is show us how messed up our hearts are. So following Jesus is not I obey, therefore I'm accepted. It's I'm accepted, therefore I obey. And this is where we jump to that verse that most people have heard before, verse 23 of Romans 3. For all, and Paul was writing to Jews and Gentiles alike, for everyone has sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Fall short is an archery term. It's missing the mark. Sin is missing the mark. The law shows us how far we've missed the mark of what God wants. And the law is a gift to us, because without the law, we might end up thinking that we're not that bad. A lot of us define sin as doing wrong, and we admit that we do that sometimes. But most of us assume that what's in our heart is pretty good. The law completely frees us from that line of thinking. Without the law, we're like the guy who's out shooting arrows, and his buddy's like, how'd you do? And he's like, yeah, I'm pretty good at this. I hit the bullseye every single time. His friend's like, how in the world did you do that? And the guy's like, well, after I shot the arrows, I just would find my arrow out in the woods and draw the circle around it. each arrow. Like, okay. The law, particularly the Ten Commandments, those of you who are tracking with us on Sundays, show us the actual real target, and they reveal just how far our hearts miss the mark. No one can be justified by the works of the law. The law's purpose is to diagnose, not repair. It's like the thermometer that measures the spiritual temperature of your heart. It's not a thermostat that can adjust that temperature, though. Or like we've said, the law is like railroad tracks. It points us in the right direction, but it's powerless to move the freight train along the tracks. So reading Romans 2 and 3, Paul is weaving in and out of the law. It's supposed to give you the feeling of spiritually drowning. That's who the people that were in the original audience would have felt after getting up to this point. You ever have that feeling of drowning? I don't know if you've almost died of drowning. I did when I was a kid. And I just remember like the water overwhelming. You're struggling to breathe. You're trying to fight to the surface. You're panicking and you feel overwhelmed by the water. And this is how we should feel about our sin after Romans 2 and 3. Overwhelmed. Like everywhere I turn, I find more guilt and corruption. I look at my bad deeds and see that they're full of anger and selfishness and rebellion. But then I look at my good deeds and see that they're full of pride and competitiveness and jealousy and selfishness. And so then we say with Paul, "Oh, wretched man that I am stained through and through with sin." But this is where things turn around. Verse 21, "But now the righteousness of God has been manifested or revealed apart from the law, although the law and the prophets bear witness to it. Righteousness of God is through faith in Jesus Christ to all who believe, for there is no distinction." And then verse 23 is in there. "We are all sinners." All of us are sinners. All of us have fallen short of the glory of God. And then verse 24, "We are justified freely by his grace as a gift through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus." There are so many important words in this short passage. But the first one that we're going to look at tonight is the word justified. So justified, that's the word that Luther said launched the Protestant Reformation. So here's what was going on back in the day. The Roman Catholic Church in Luther's day taught that justification was a process by which God actually made you into a righteous person by infusing his righteousness into you by means of the sacraments like baptism, the Eucharist, confirmation, last rites, etc. Never had much value in the word "but" until I started reading about it. That's very true. Very important. Nice to see you, Steve. So, Roman Catholic Church, justification is a process. Eventually, through observing the sacraments and confession and doing good, you'd become a righteous enough person that God would declare you justified. And if by the time you died, you weren't righteous enough, you'd go to purgatory, where your sin would be purged from you through fire and suffering. Purgatory. So this was taught as the process of justification. But Martin Luther pointed out that that's not what the word justified means. And he said justification means a legal declaration that happens all at once, not a process, all at once. So justification is not a process whereby we become righteous. Justification is a pronouncement whereby we're declared righteous all at once. Justification doesn't refer to that transformation of the heart. That's sanctification, actually, where we grow and God works on us and we become more like Jesus. That's a process. Justification, one time, declaration of righteousness. In justification, God's righteousness is not infused into us. It's credited to us. Think of it this way. If I get accused of a crime, I get hauled into court. The jury decides I'm innocent of all charges. The judge declares me not guilty. I'm cleared all at once. I'm justified. He doesn't give me a 7-step program through which I can become innocent. He declares me innocent all at once, and I walk out a free person, just as if I'd never sinned. In the gospel, because Jesus' righteousness is credited or imputed to us, we are declared justified. It's not that I become righteous enough that God declares me righteous. He's like, okay, You're classified as righteous, but while I'm still sinful, God declares me righteous because of my faith in Jesus. This was pictured in the Old Testament. We've talked a lot about the process of sacrifice in the Old Testament. So once a year, a family would bring a lamb, a perfect, unblemished lamb. And they would lay it on the altar to be killed, and they would lay their hands on it. And in that moment, as the lamb was killed, they were justified. The lamb was held responsible for their sin before God, and they walked out free. This is what Jesus fulfilled. When John the Baptist saw Jesus, that's why he said, "Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." And on the cross, the sins of the entire human race, past, present, future, were laid on Jesus. Martin Luther said, "All the prophets foresaw that on the cross, Jesus became the greatest murderer, adulterer, thief, rebel, and blasphemer that there would ever be. Our most merciful Father sent his only Son into the world and said to him, 'Jesus, you will become Peter the denier. You will become Paul, that persecutor, blasphemer, and cruel oppressor. You will become David the adulterer. You'll become Adam, that sinner which did eat the apple in paradise. You'll become the husband who's neglected his family, the immoral woman who wrecked someone's marriage, the drug addict, the teenage girl lying to her parents, the hypocrite living a double life, the proud, the selfish, the apathetic. He became all of those things and died for them so that you and I could be innocent of them. So that when I lay my hand of faith on him, when I say all I come to you with is need, God, I need you, and I believe that Jesus' sacrifice was enough, my sin becomes his righteousness becomes mine. And that happens in an instant, simultaneous. It's not that I become righteous enough that he declares me righteous, but while I'm a sinner, God declares me righteous because Christ's righteousness is given to me. The way Martin Luther said it is simul justus et peccator, or peccator, at the same time, just and sinners. At the same time, just and sinners. I mean, if you're the kind of person who likes tattoos in another language, that's not a bad one to use. But that's the heart of the Christian gospel. What does God do to us when we believe? So all have fallen short of the glory of God. Everyone has sinned. What is the hope? We're going to talk about grace as a gift. We're going to talk about redemption and what that means. But the justification piece means that God, in one moment, declares us righteous when we accept the sacrifice of Jesus and the substitutionary death of Jesus on our behalf. Our sin becomes his sin. His righteousness becomes ours. That's a huge deal. And that was way different than what the church back in the day was looking to do. The Roman Catholic Church was like, all right, you can do a bunch of these things. They're very much, hey, what you can do to become righteous as God works this process in you. It was never about that. It was, you are accepted, you are righteous, now obey. And then the process of sanctification starts. Justification all at once. Just as if you'd never sinned, you are righteous before God, and now start living like somebody who is righteous before God. And God works in us through his spirit, through his word, through the community that he's put around us, and we begin to grow and become like Jesus. Some things we change in a moment, some things is a process, but justification, never a process. All right. And that's why Jesus is the only way, because in any other religion, right, we have lists of things that we have to do to be enough. The gospel, that good news, what we believe as Christians is that we could never be enough, but that Jesus was the only way, the only truth, and the only life. And through him and what he did for us, we can be right before God. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. So we're going to talk about redemption next week. But that's the first part of it, justification. This is a huge passage of scripture. So I hope you are, I was talking about it with the guys. We had our men's night this past Monday night, how when you go through the the Ten Commandments, you come away. The Ten Commandments were never made to make us feel good about ourselves, where we could be like, okay, that one nailed it, did all that. No, we're supposed to look at it and see how much we fall short, but we aren't supposed to stay there. Like, we aren't supposed to walk away ashamed. We walk away understanding the grace and mercy of God in our lives and the righteousness of Jesus. And we walk away determined to honor God with our lives, to honor God in our relationships, to honor God with the way we handle our resources and our time and our talents and everything we do. We want to point people to the same Jesus who gave us his righteousness. All right. I hope you all have a fantastic week. Glad to be back live. Hope you're encouraged this Wednesday night, and we will talk to you all soon. For those of you who jump over to Bay State Baptist at 7:30 to hear my friend, Pastor Brian Spicer, let's do this. For everyone else, hopefully we'll see you at 10 o'clock on Sunday, or you're watching this later. Regardless, I am grateful for the community that God has brought together and our local churches and pastors that we get to follow Jesus together with. I appreciate you. We'll talk to you later.